And we are recording. Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm, as always, your host, Brady Robertson, and today we have a really interesting episode. Today, we are talking about the home theater software previously called XBMC, nowadays going by the name Kodi. Welcome to the show, Keith and Brent. Why don't you guys just briefly explain who you are and what you do in the project?
Brent, go first.
I'll go first. So I do some development on core program of Kodi. I've been in the project since 20. Well, my first contribution was in 2017. I actually looked this back up. So I've been in the team for I think since 2019, I think, or maybe 2018. So yeah, we just at the moment I'm performing the release manager duties for. We did that for 20 V20 Nexus and for the upcoming 21 Omega. So I'll be running that through, getting it out the door.
Awesome. Keith?
Yeah. So I'm Keith. I'm currently president of the Kodi Foundation, which we always joke means that I do everything nobody else wants to do. I really don't touch code. I'm more of an administrative person. And my favorite part, and I've been a Kodi team member since 2011. Wow. And my favorite part of being part of XBMC, what it was back then, but the whole team in general is I get the luxury of organizing DevCon every year. So we get 30, 40 of us together in some random city, typically in Europe, always in Europe, but typically we've done it in Eastern Europe a bunch, but now we're branching out where pretty much all the team members, if you're a team member, you can come and yeah, we all get together and hang out. So it's great to be able to actually see each other in person. And we've been able to fly Brent over a couple times now.
I'm sure it's great to be able to put like a face to the contributions in the project. It's not just, hey, this is some random username on the GitHub. They're just doing some contributions. They might be great contributions, but seeing who's actually behind it sort of gives a more human aspect to what's going on involved in the project. This is going to be a mess with neither of you knowing who to respond next.
I just leave it to Keith here. I was like, yeah, absolutely. It's nice that sort of interactive side of things, because then you get to actually interact with other team members outside of just the Kodi aspect of it. You sort of talk to them about life, have some drinks, have some fun. So yeah, it's good. It brings a different aspect to it, so you can really get to know people and get to know what drives them. So it's good.
I know that when we did our pre-talk, Keith wanted to do a lot of focus on like the direction of Kodi, the development, bringing more people into the project. But I think before we can get to that, it's important to go over what Kodi actually is and the state that it's currently in. Because while Kodi is certainly like one of the big media center software, there's a lot of people out there who just don't have media centers, who've never really worked in this space. You don't really know what the software exists in this space actually is. So why don't we just do like a brief explanation of what Kodi is and sort of what value it brings to the user?
Sure, I can handle that. Yeah, so Kodi is home theater software. So the most common thing that I ask people when they ask me what Kodi is have you ever heard of VLC? Have you ever used VLC? Most people say yes. And then I'm like, okay, so VLC is a media player and we're a media center. So one of the core differences between that is we're really designed for that 10-foot interface. We claim we coined the term 10-foot interface. Who knows if that's true or not, but I think it might be in our Wikipedia. We were always designed around the aspect of being able to use an actual remote and being able to be controllable from the couch. So keyboard and mouse is not something, HTPC is probably the most common phrase these days, home theater PC. And that was kind of the space that Kodi and XBMC have always been in. One really big difference between us and other projects of our nature is we're one monolithic app, meaning that the same code runs on every single platform. So when Brent joined the team, he joined because he was interested in getting the Apple TV 4 to work. So it was, and they had to basically get the entire code base of 8 million plus lines of code to compile and function to a pretty high degree of functionality in order to kind of declare it an official port. And so that's one of the big aspect differences between us and other projects. So you have projects like VLC that run on a dozen platforms, but typically they're different code bases, and they use a library called libvlc to basically glue all that together.
Yep.
Now, in 2023, which design is better? Probably not ours, but hey, that is what we are today. And one of the nice aspects of it is when you know that our stuff runs on a platform, it means that usually like 99% of the time everything runs on it. So that's always a neat experience to be like, oh, Kodi runs on this device and there's hardware decoding on this device. So that means that I could run libretro and I could run all the retro games and I can run, you know, any other various features that we have in our platform. So that's probably one of the biggest differences. A big common use is the Raspberry Pi scene, right? One of the things we really empower you is to allow you to customize everything. We have a ton of skins. All of that is open source, of course. All of our add-ons are open source, everything. And so, unsurprisingly, the tinkering community of the Raspberry Pi has picked us up extremely. And there's probably millions of Pis out there that run our software. And that's always super exciting. And it's fun to go to Linux conferences and have people talk about Pis. And we definitely get a lot of attention when we're at the same conferences. So it's really stepping back. We existed before like Apple TV existed and Android TV and Roku and all of those type of front ends that now exist in the TV space. And ours differentiates the most because it's completely customizable. It allows you to, you know, if you're going to spend thousands of dollars on a home theater system, you want your experience to also be exactly how you want it as well. So that's the space that we fall under. But you know, we're basically we're by developers entirely. We're a developer ran community. So because of that, we're not the easiest to use. Ease of use and user experience definitely is not your first time wizards aren't in Kodi, but it's really, really flexible, and there's a lot of power behind it, especially if you start digging in. And if you have a specific use case that you want to achieve, there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and you could almost always be able to make that work some way, somehow.
Well, going back to the platform, I guess, consistency, I'm sure from the developer side, that adds a lot of challenges to each release. Like trying to make sure that if, you know, having things that you already have in the code base work consistently, that's one thing. And then new features that maybe were developed with one platform in mind initially, then need to be brought across to the rest of the code base as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You find that more often than not, someone will bring in or will want to merge a feature that sort of works for their platform. Generally, we sort of try to not push back on it, but get them to try to implement that feature so it is, I guess, platform agnostic as much as we can. Like there are some features like your Dolby Vision playback and that sort of stuff that requires hardware. So there are some things that just make it very difficult, but as best we can, everything is try to be designed to be a way that you can implement most features on any of our supported platforms. And for the most part, generally every platform will get that feature, but there are obviously differences from platform to platform and what's available.
Right.
You've obviously got the Linux space where your HDR stuff is forever, well, to me, it always appears to be a forever ongoing going thing, and maybe we'll get there one day.
There's some work that Red Hat's doing on that, but it's very much work they're doing on that. It's not. There's
Exactly.
and Valve is doing some stuff in the gaming space as well. They've got some early HDR stuff working, but it's not plug and play at this point. It's very much you've got to run this Git branch, and you got to do some extra additional tweaking. It's not there just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have faith that will come through. The it's one of the good things about open source, where there's enough people that have a care for it, and it'll come through, and it's definitely something that, as you say, there's a lot of big companies putting a bit of money towards it now. So hopefully we'll get there. And with we got sort of developers in the team that are contributing to all the Linux kernel stuff based around some of the SBCs and that sort of stuff. So having team members that are actively supporting those things at that level is really good for the project. So yeah.
So whilst the core feature set is intended to be across every platform, there's still going to be a place for these like platform specific like plugins and things like that people want to make, like that don't intend to go into like the core project. It's something they just want to extend for their specific use case.
Yep, absolutely. So we support well, currently we have two methods of add-ons essentially when it comes to that. We've got our binary add-ons, which is essentially code that is compiled to run natively on each of the platforms essentially. So a lot of our PVR, so the video, so TV based stuff is based around those binary add-ons. We got visualizations and a bunch of other sort of add-ons that do that as well. But then we also have our plugin system using it's based on Python, and it is very, very extensible. It's pretty wild what some people are able to pull off in the Python ecosystem for Kodi. Some of the add-ons that they're doing is really, really awesome to see. And yeah, there's a huge community about it. So if anyone's sort of interested in the Python side of things, check out the forums. There's a lot of support around there from non-team members, just regular users who have sort of had that itch to make something or make an add-on that does something for them. So it's pretty. Well, I think it's really great like that. So yeah.
So I do want to get more into the plugins and things like that a bit later, but one thing that is really important is in the early days, like back in the, the 2010s, where like it was still in that XBMC space, the like DVDs, things like that were still a really popular medium to consume content. It sort of made sense how a home theater piece of software would actually make sense for like the legitimate use cases. I know you guys don't want to talk about the other ways that Kodi can be used, but what is the place of Kodi in a world where most of the content consumption is done through these streaming platforms like Disney Plus, like Netflix, like Crunchyroll, Hulu, and all of these other things that exist?
Yeah. So I think that we can play a large role there, right? So for a pure streaming user, one of the nice things about our platform is people have written third-party add-ons for essentially any type of streaming service that exists. You can see we've had folks write Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, tons and tons. And the best part is that it's a consistent user experience across them that is themable, that is skinnable. Like you can choose kind of how that looks. There's been some inroads that people are trying to build the ability to do. There's varying levels of media importation scripts that exist as well, where you could essentially put a stub file inside of your library that allows you to basically look like you have that piece of media. So you have that cover, you have all of that sitting next to other media you might have as well. Another big aspect is we're probably the most extensive front end for DVR and PVR solutions out there that's open source. So there's a ton of people. I myself have an HD home run in my house that I have a couple tuners. I think Brent does as well, right?
Yep. So that was one of my first sort of things into the Kodi ecosystem was actually contributing to the PVR HD home run binary add-on. So that was back in 2017. So things like that, being able to use that. And we had Silicon Dust were at the time did have official Python plugins that they were contributing. I don't believe they do anymore, but it's as you can really work with a lot of stuff. So yeah.
So because those add-ons are open source, people have extended them and continued the life of that. But getting back to the streaming question, you know,
Mhm.
it's nice to have a consistent user experience. One of the main things, especially when you deal with people who maybe have low vision or things of that nature, it's the inconsistency across every platform. You have to learn new UIs. I get annoyed sometimes with how bad some of these user interfaces are and how they handle scrolling and things like that. If I am at someone's house and I have to use different interfaces in order to pull up media.
Mhm.
And so it's really nice to come back to a Kodi environment where you have support for all of these streaming platforms, but you have them in the consistent way that you expect them to be.
Mhm.
And nobody, at times people can update it because of course these are all reverse engineered, but
Right.
by and large they tend to work. It usually works pretty well. And so that is one of the big experience things that if you really want to own and you care about the experience of playback and the look and feel of all of your media, this is probably the number one way people are able to kind of control that experience.
Right. Well, even with these systems that, like, you know, take like, let's say Crunchyroll, for example, their web interface is entirely different from like their PS5 interface, which is entirely different from their other interface, entirely different from another interface. So even just on a singular platform, there is going to be this complete mismatch of user design, and I can totally understand why a user, especially one who does have those accessibility issues, or someone who is more, you know, someone who's elderly, who's not really like doesn't really have this deep understanding of how these systems sort of play together. I can totally understand why someone would want to have a system like this, or in that case, you might have, you know, someone in your family who is more technical set up this system for you and give you a, you know, this simple thing to work with. Now, on the topic of reverse engineering, that does lead into something really important. I've seen a lot of confusion online about like what Kodi is, how Kodi works, is Kodi legal, like how this like fits together and how these streaming platforms actually work on this system.
Sure. I can tackle that.
Mhm.
So we have our own repository of add-ons that we support.
Mhm.
And all of those, of course, you can install, and they're done via typically reverse engineering is how the Python scripts are written. They're all open source. Anyone can look at their source code and you can kind of see how it works.
Mhm.
Now, these may or may not violate terms of service agreements, but by and large, we're trying to do things in the way that the media company whose add-on we support does them.
Right.
The same way, you know, and that's really what our goal is to bring our own experience, but have the same functionality as whatever their own app has, right? Maybe you can select different resolutions versus theirs you can't, or things of that nature. But most of the time, we try to be feature parity. If it's possible, sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
But we don't ship any media ourselves, right?
Right.
So when you go to our website and you download our binaries or you install it from Google Play, you pretty much get, just like when you install VLC, you just get a player. You just get something that has the ability. Now, the difference between us and something like VLC is that we do have the add-on repo, our own add-on repo that you could install. So you can install our add-on repo, and then you can get a variety of different media sources that exist today. Hopefully the ones that you pick work. Sometimes they don't, unfortunately, because of course this is all community driven.
Mhm.
But because we're an open source platform, we really believe in the freedom and the ability for anybody to install what they want. And so just like on an Android device, you can turn off the ability to only install apps from their own Google Play, and you can sideload essentially whatever you want, right?
Sure.
And so what we allow you to do is the same thing, and you can install a new repository from a zip file that we have not vetted in any way. We have no idea the contents of it. We tell you that when you turn off this selection, of course, just like Google does. And at that point, you open yourself up to a variety of different types of add-ons, right? I think, unfortunately, one thing that happened inside of this space is that a bunch of enterprising individuals saw that some people were writing some add-ons that were essentially just scraping other internet websites that had copyrighted material on them.
Right.
And they built add-ons that you didn't see any of the ads or anything like that. So, and then other enterprising individuals kind of bundled those together and were selling boxes that had those pre-installed.
Right.
Now, discounting the copyright infringement issues, you look at something like that, and any of us who are technical look at that and we're like, wow, that's a terrible idea for you to buy something like that. It's just going to break tomorrow, and then who's going to fix it, right? And so unfortunately, we've been overwhelmed in our forums and in our social media with people who have been tricked or knew what they were doing and have bought devices like this and have then ran into issues with them, and they're like, where do I go? So unfortunately, there's a reputation problem inside of the space where some people who are non-technical have their only experience with Kodi might be through avenues like this.
Right.
And it's super unfortunate. We don't have the money to fight an image like that in the media, and the UK especially has done a fantastic job of publishing stories in literal newspapers about, how to install add-ons and things like dodgy add-ons like this, unfortunately. So there's not a whole lot that we can do about it because it's outside of our control. These are things that live on GitHub. These are things. So just like, there's tons of websites that you can download cracked APKs and things like that. That happens well inside of our environment, right? But of course, Google has a few more dollars to spend on branding than we do. So yeah, and so that's kind of a common space. So it always, as soon as somebody posts something like, is Kodi legal? You just have to kind of laugh because it's like, is a car legal? You could totally, it's quite easy to, do nefarious things with a car, but of course it's legal. It's just a piece of software and it's an application. And we don't condone all the uses, but we definitely believe in freedom, and you can use your software however you want. And I mean, that's one of the beauties of open source, right? And so we try to curate an environment for you that is safe and trustworthy. And when we put an add-on inside of our repo, we've done due diligence. We've had manual people actually go through and look at the source code. You, of course, are welcome to look at the source code as well. We link source code to pretty much everything. All of them are on GitHub. You could host an add-on in our repo that isn't on GitHub, but it's annoying, so most people don't do it. And in general, we want to keep the open ecosystem alive as much as possible. I think that's one of the big things, right? Like there's not a whole lot of consumer-focused open ecosystem products out there, right? You look at Android. I've been beating up on Android, but Android is a perfect example of an open source operating system that Google Play services is all closed.
Well, they recently decided they were going to pull the phone app and something else from like the open project as well. So, hey, it's open.
And I mean, ASOP, like ASOP and actual Google, Android are so vastly different at this point that it's, and on top of that, like you run into the same problems where you run into tons of problems with certification and things like that. Like, I don't know, like Android is my least favorite example of an open source project. And unfortunately, it's the most common. Chrome OS, on the other hand, not to pick on Google so much. Chrome OS is fantastic, right? Like Chrome OS has done a fantastic job of keeping updates, of having detailed lists on EOLing. But most importantly, out of all of that, they try really hard to run mainline kernels. They try really hard to force people to do open standards. A lot of our video decoding stuff that Kodi uses are now vendor agnostic because they're standards based. And most of that was pushed by people who were being paid by Google to do that. And basically they were forcing vendors to say, if you don't conform to these industry standards, we won't, we'll just drop support for you in the next release. We do that to varying effects, but that just ends up building forks. Unfortunately, we have a couple of forks because of that. But like in general, Chrome OS has done a fantastic job, and I'm really thankful for, some stewards of that. I'm glad that for some reason, Android team was never like that, but the Chrome OS team has been fantastic in that sense, right?
You kind of diverged way off the topic at some point during that. I don't know when it happened, but so let's talk about a legitimate platform. Let's say Netflix, let's say Hulu. It doesn't really matter which one, just pick your favorite platform. With the plugin to support that platform on Kodi, how does that actually work? Like, just as like, obviously there's going to be different specifics for the individual plugin, but as like a generic thing, if you wanted to, if like, I don't know, company XYZ started a web streaming platform and you wanted to have a plugin on Kodi, what would be the general approach of getting that working?
So yeah, I can definitely take that. So I think one of the biggest things that we've done in the last few years that has been super important to adoption of these streaming platforms is in the web, you have a thing in web browsers, you have a content decryption manager. So how DRM works is they use a content decryption manager in order to decrypt content, or CDM as they're called, right? Luckily for the open source community, the CDM that Chrome uses is open source. So the only thing that's closed source is the binary for Widevine, which is Google's own DRM software, right? And so because of the CDM being open source, we were able to basically integrate that, reverse engineer that. Not really reverse engineer, because we were able to basically just port it over. And so we've ported that CDM now into Kodi, onto basically all the platforms. And as long as we can find a decryption library for it, so in Linux, of course, it's a .so, in Windows, it's a DLL, right? And we can drop in that decryption. So there's a Widevine helper tool that essentially you install, and it goes and downloads that, pulls that off of the internet for you, and then installs it. And then you have the ability to install any DRM enabled streaming service, right? So if you were, let's say you were Crunchyroll and you wanted to have a Kodi add-on, you already have all the technology for it. So it's just going in and figuring out the Python front end, right? So one thing that I have experienced I for a while was talking to content partners a ton, trying to get them to write official add-ons to varying degrees. The HD Home Run one that Fuzzard talked about, right? And a few others. And one of the most common things that people mentioned is, hey, we don't want to release an open source add-on because people would be able to steal our content easier, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, we've re-implemented a web browser. So are you going to support a web browser? It's the same thing, guys. I worked with a content partner, which shall remain nameless, that told me this. And then I opened up I web inspected their URLs, and they weren't even rolling any of their tokens. So I could pull the URL out of Web Inspector, put it into VLC, and 3 months later, I did the same thing when I presented to their CTO, and they were like, that's not a problem, though. And I was like, how can in this same conversation you tell me that having an open source add-on will open you up for any more concerns when everybody has a web browser and can do this in 2 seconds, guys? Like, really? Like, it was unfortunate. And so we definitely run into issues like that but from a technical standpoint of view, it's super easy, right? We kind of try to make that whole experience easy. So we could support list mode, we could support thumbnails, all of that stuff. Like any of our standard add-ons support that today. And we have a look and feel that's already built in, kind of like back in the day, Roku did the same thing where all the Roku apps look the same. And the reason why is because there's kind of a unified and easy way to build an add-on that framework's already there. You could, of course, customize that and have your own skin and make the look and feel differently. But by and large, majority of the add-ons look the exact same and look very similar. And they're very, very quickly to get up. So if you support Widevine, which if you want to be able to stream media in Chrome, you have to. If you want to be able to stream media on an Android device, you have to. That media can be played back in Kodi. How many hoops you have to go through to get there? That's a whole different question. Right. So random thing, Netflix doesn't support SSL. They wrote their own secure library because they didn't trust it. And they released it open source, though, in JavaScript. It's open source. Sure. It's called Missile. It's called Missile. And MSL, I forgot exactly what the extensions are, but a community member had to port that library from JavaScript to Python in order to get Netflix working.
What? Wait, I found the repo. Okay, sure. Sure. Okay. Sure, Netflix. Why not? Okay. Hey, at least it's open. I don't know why they made their own thing, but sure, at least it's open. So, okay. Kodi's not the only thing in this space. There are other systems like Plex, there's Jellyfin, and other platforms like this. So, do you see Kodi as sort of a competitor to its contemporaries, or something that's sort of, I guess, complementary, or how do you really see it as it currently is, or just in the future as well?
So I'll take this too, Brent, because I get this question all the time as well.
Okay.
Full disclosure, I used to work at Plex. So, it's always interesting because I get this question often where people ask me if, especially when I worked at Plex, people were like, oh, you also do Kodi stuff? Aren't they competitors? Well, they're really not, because Kodi's goal is really to be the best customizable media center possible. It's really about your experience that you want to have with your media. And that is a unique experience for you. Plex's mantra, and same with Jellyfin and MB and all of those other versions that exist out there, is really your media everywhere.
Right.
So they really don't, we focus on depth with Kodi, right? We make that experience be as customizable as possible, the same code base. We want, you to be able to use your Raspberry Pi, make something work that you could also run on your PC, that you could also run on your Android TV, all of that same experience overall. Mm-hmm. With Plex has gotten better, and Jellyfin to a much less degree, but I think that's their goal too, is to make the user interface look the same, but the back end and how that app actually runs is completely different. Mm-hmm. So they have their own player. Like every device basically has a different player, so has different experience. Like sometimes one thing will support, the ability to decode 4K, and the other device has to transcode, meaning that a server somewhere has to convert that file, mm-hmm. things of that nature. So you're going to get a varying user experience across. The most important thing in the client server architecture, media centers like that, are your media always plays, right. Regardless of what the quality is, regardless of that, their focus is your media plays. Our focus is you pick exactly how your media is, and your media plays back as good as the hardware that you have can support it, right? If you don't have a hardware decoder, we'll fall back to software. If you don't have, right, it's that same media player, it's the same actual media decoder library that we use that runs on all platforms. So the kind of our angle on where we fit in the market come from two different places, right? And so there is definitely some overlap. That Venn diagram has some overlap. But if you really care about your experience, Plex looks the exact same everywhere. Plex, isn't going to bring you the same sort of, you're not going to have that same sort of personal connection. It is a much easier ecosystem to get into. They've kind of tuned it to be a much more user-friendly than us. Mm. And as a side note, Plex actually started from XBMC roots.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So just to not go on too much of a tangent, but originally XBMC only ran on the Xbox, hence the word Xbox Media Center. And a guy by the name of Dark, D4RK, who now works for Google, and if anyone ever talks to him, tell him to come say hi to us, because I've messaged him on LinkedIn and he's never responded. But he ported that DirectX code over to OpenGL so it would run in Linux. Mm-hmm. And this was around 2007, 2008. And then a bunch of people started picking up ports. Somebody took that OpenGL code and ported it back to DirectX for Windows support. And then a couple of enterprising folks, mainly a guy by the name of Alon, started writing a port to Mac OS, mm-hmm. then OS X, right? And so he kind of called his ragtag group of people that was working on that OS XBMC, and they did a whole bunch of the initial work to kind of get it working on Mac OS, what is now Mac OS. That Alon is the CTO and co-founder of Plex. When Plex decided that the team decided that they didn't want to fully support the same features, and their whole philosophy of media diverged, as we can now see. They decided to go and do their own thing and start Plex, and they named they basically forked XBMC and called it Plex Media Center was the original name, which later became Plex Home Theater, which later became, I think it's just Plex for HTPC is what it's now called, but it doesn't use any of our legacy code at all, right? Only Plex Media Center and Plex Home Theater both used that, and they stopped using that, I want to say around like 2013, but I could be wrong somewhere. Anyways, but for a good like 4 or 5 years, that was like one of their main things that Plex used. So yeah, that's where Plex started. So them, and then another company which you might have not heard of called Boxy. And Boxy released the Boxy Box, which was one of the first Linux hardware devices that ran media. And it was funny because it was shaped like half of a box. So D-Link sold it, and it was a funny box that you should totally look at.
Yeah.
So the Boxy Box was actually, so Boxy, not to like diverge, but I feel like this is fun history, right? So Boxy got some funding. Those guys were like, we're going to create the first commercial fork of XBMC, but they contributed back a ton to us in the form of they gave us the initial funding that we started our nonprofit with. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States. And they also hosted the first DevCon, which they brought, I think, 15 team members out to Amsterdam and meeting up with the Boxy folks as well. So maybe one of the team members that is still active might have been there, a guy by the name of Spiff, who's amazing. We are so lucky. Spiff was around during the early days. So our project's over 20 years old. I want to say this is the 21st year. And Spiff has been around since almost the beginning. So it's amazing to still have him on the team, because all the time, like, people run into stuff where they're like, oh, I don't know how this thing worked. And Spiff will tell you, well, back in 2005, when we wrote it, we thought that it should work this way. And it's like, wow, that code still works. That's amazing. And so it's nice to have someone with historical knowledge. But yeah, so Boxy and Plex were the two commercial forks of XBMC. There's been a few smaller ones, but they were the like consumer-driven ones. Unfortunately, for Boxy, they did not succeed, and Samsung ended up buying the ashes of them, and now their employees are scattered around everywhere. I've met a few of them, great guys, but they did a lot in that space to kind of bring media to the forefront of like standalone devices before the Android TVs and Apple TVs and like all of that stuff. I guess Apple TV was around then, but it was a PowerPC box. It was Apple TV 1, and it was the big white square, and it was very limited. You couldn't sideload anything. You couldn't load your own apps at all. You basically had to use whatever media they gave you, right?
So I guess that sort of takes us into the direction of the development of the project. So Kodi is developed entirely by volunteers. It is an open source project through and through. Now, with that, obviously you get a lot of people who come and go, who make a couple of patches here and there, but getting people to actually stick around in the project, this is a difficult challenge, especially when you're talking about the more complex parts of the system. Like, skinning is one thing, but we're talking about the core of Kodi. That's where you start running into issues with, having a lot of developers who you can trust to work on the project, you can trust to work on good code, and aren't just going to write like 3 patches and disappear.
Yep, absolutely. Obviously, with a 21-year-old project, you sort of mentioned there's been a lot of contributors over the years. One of the hardest things, Kodi really is a very large project. It encompasses a lot of code, and the fact that it's the multi-platform, it's very there's a lot of history to it, let's say. So there's code that you'll look in Git, and you'll see code that hasn't been touched for probably 15, 16 years. So when sort of just first being merged, it's still running in Kodi 21 at the moment. You sort of look at that, and it's yeah, as you said, it's difficult in that sense for any one person to really understand fully the entire, from top to bottom, every part of Kodi. And as the years have gone on, people who contributed major parts of those things, as they come and go from the project, all we can really hope on is that those people that are around or still make themselves available to the project for us to pick their brains, and like, so you got Spiff, who isn't all that active, although last year he had a bit of a spree. He was doing a fair bit, but these people still hang around our sort of Slack or our IRC that we can sort of chat to, and they can sort of give us a bit of information about why things were done and pulling that through. So I've sort of said this in our sort of pre sort of thing. If you like puzzles, Kodi is very good in that regard. Just untangling and getting it all together and how it all works at such a large, I guess, diverse program. It's good fun from that side of things. But yeah, it can prove difficult at times, just trying to work out the reasoning for some things. As you say, we have drive-by commit. Everyone who's a team member worked on whatever they choose to work on.
Right.
No one is told that, oh, you have to work on this or you have to work on that. If someone doesn't have or has only really got a niche sort of case, like we've got current sort of Garbear, he's pretty much been the sole driving force behind all the libretro implementation of retro players, as we call it in Kodi. So when you've got sort of people that really have a real good focus on certain aspects, we get great things like that. But yeah, it can be often difficult to continue them on at various points in time.
Right.
So yeah.
Right now, I've got the like contributor list open on the GitHub, and I'm looking at some of the biggest contributors on here. You've got Mondelez at the top here, who most of their work was done back in 2013 to 2016. 300,000 lines of code added, 1 million lines removed. Fernet Mentor, who's had 1.2 million lines added, 1.8 million removed. Last commit was 2019 or so. And there's a lot of these people who've been really important to the project over the years, who, maybe make a couple of commits here and there, but aren't anywhere near as dedicated or deeply involved in the project like they were. But even though there are these people who have done so much work in the project, it's not like there's nothing to be done in the project. There's still plenty of work to be done, and you shouldn't be scared away by the fact that a project is so old that, there are going to be these really, ancient pieces of code that have been there from the start. You're right that it is definitely sort of like it's a puzzle. It's a challenge. What I'm trying to say is don't be scared away by the fact that the project has such a long history.
Absolutely. I think the history is actually a bonus for it. There's a lot of places that if you've got an interest in something, you could pick away at it and improve it. There's always improvements through such a large legacy code base. So anyone who's interested in a particular sort of feature set or anything that they want to pick something and dive into it, it's very rewarding. As I said, we're run millions of devices. I think what are we, 8 or 9 million installs on Android alone. It's nice to think that code that I or anyone contributes is being used and enjoyed by so many people out there. So it's very, very rewarding in that aspect. So it's anyone who's sort of interested in program. And the other thing with this with Kodi is because of the size of it there and the amount of contributors we've had over the years, we've got people that are professional in the industry. We've got people that just I'm not in software engineering industry, so I don't do that for a living. You've got other people that are in the academic space. So I believe Fernet is very much, or was in that space for a long. I think he still is, probably. I don't know, Keith. Yeah. So you sort of seeing how Kodi has been architected and sort of work. It gives you again a lot of insights into, I guess, industry changes over such a long period of time. Like it's you can sort of go back to and see that, oh well, designs and the way that you would sort of do something has changed or varied from what it was in the past, and what is now becoming, as everything around the ecosystem evolves, becoming more standard or better. Like security aspect, all that side of things is being improved, and it's it's, as I said, it's having such a legacy project is good. Having such a legacy open source project is good because it gives you a lot of insight into I guess how the industry has evolved over 20 odd years. So yeah.
And not just like the computer industry, but also the media, right? Like not just like source code and stuff like that, but think about, you mentioned DVDs, previously, right? Like that's really when we came out, and the original Xbox, of course, had a DVD player that you could actually put DVDs in and you could watch them. But all the media involvements we've also had to keep up with, and we've also had to, sometimes maybe not the best, be able to figure out how to support, right? And so, and now the last 10 years has been small form factor devices such as Raspberry Pi. We had two of the first, I think, 10 serial numbers of the original Raspberry Pi, and we were one of the first apps to be fully running on it. And so it's just exciting to kind of be at times at the forefront, but just be involved in this and being able to show. We've worked with a lot of partners, Intel being one of them, as like a showcase piece to like help get some technology. We actually have a channel where we have some Intel devs working on HDR with us today to kind of help improve that. And same with AMD. I think we still have the AMD channel as well. I love seeing that collaboration because, people look at us as being not only a good sample app to prove that, hey, we got this thing to work, but also, we are agnostic. Like we don't care. We'll work with pretty much anybody out there in order to try to further the movement of open source software, especially in the multimedia space.
I was unaware that you guys were working working on the Raspberry Pi that early. Wow. That's kind of incredible.
There's a funny video that I'm narrating that is the first demo that people have seen media running on the Raspberry Pi, that like we're sitting in a hotel room at Scale, which is a Linux conference in LA, and we just got the Pi booting. It's the first time any of us had seen it, and it's about 3 months before general availability. And me, the Uni, who is one of our core contributors, and then it was Nate Benson as well. It was us three in a hotel room, and they were like, hey, let's record a video. And it's like, oh, you can do it. So I'm the voice of this video, and I've seen a Raspberry Pi for all of like 5 minutes at this point. But yeah. And so it was great. I think that was serial number 9 or 12, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Yeah. We didn't want to brag about it in the video, but I really wanted to, but I resisted.
That's so cool. Like it's really cool that like Kodi's just been around here for this long, but with that in mind, it does also come with some drawbacks as well. When you have a code base this old, there are going to be some design decisions, some limitations caused by, I know you talked about the fact that you guys try to be consistent across every platform. Just that by itself is already a decision that causes a lot of headaches, I'm sure. But besides that one, what sort of issues have come across in the project that really either need to be architected around or re-architected just full stop to bring it up to a more modern standard?
That's a good question, actually. I pick your poison, really. Probably every part of the Kodi code base, except for probably the retro player stuff, because I would probably say that's probably one of the newest major features that sort of come in. So, but even that, when did Gabe, was that 2012, or when did he first do his or apply for that GSOC, Keith? Do you remember? Was it 2016?
Sounds about right. It was something like that. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was something. He worked on it. Maybe it was even 2011. Like he started that minute ago, and
so yeah, even that, with that being sort of one of our newer sort of thing, it's still sort of 10, 12 years old sort of thing. So yeah, realistically, pick your poison, and we could probably architect things in a better. Having said that, I honestly do believe that Kodi has stood up quite well over the years with some decisions made by sort of previous contributors and the way that they've done it. The fact that we are so easily, I would sort of argue, so easily able to be run up on a completely new platform is, I guess, a testament to some of the design decisions that have been made in the past. As sort of we mentioned earlier, I was involved in pushing the TVOS port to mainline, to a main project. So there was work done earlier by Memphis and Davila, a couple of sort of guys that were doing that, but it never got mainlined. And then we had a very large rework by, you sort of mentioned Fernet earlier, who essentially rewrote our pretty much the entire video engine, I guess, which was a massive work all of its own. So it's very difficult to, like, those core features like that. It's very difficult to just say, we'll go and rewrite that, because it's so ingrained into everything. The use cases, even sort of testing these days, you implement a feature or a playback of a new codec or whatever. The testing matrix, when you look at this stuff, is just insane to work out software and hardware, as well as all, be it Windows, OS, Mac OS, or Mac Apple based stuff, Linux. It's very difficult to thoroughly test on everything, and it often ends up being, testing is really done out in the wild by our users, the feedback that they give us, and we're always forever trying to improve Kodi and make it better, because again, I use it daily. It's always used in my household, so I want it to be as good as it can be. So yeah, it's I guess it's difficult to sort of pick any particular area. You could pick anything, and I guess with hindsight, see that well, that should have been done this way. But again, as time goes on, there are just different I guess requirements at the time, and I'm sure that we will re-architect many things over the coming years as well. But yeah, it is what it is, really. So
well, one of the recent topics, you sort of brought up something really important in there, hearing feedback from the users. One of the recent topics floating around the Linux world is a change that's coming into Fedora Linux. So with Fedora 40, they want to bring in a telemetry system where they're collecting information about, how people are interacting with GNOME, how they're, using this software, what software they're using. And the contributor that brought this idea in basically made the argument that opt-in data is basically useless because of how biased it is towards the extreme enthusiast users. And I was curious what sort of perspective you guys have on this, from both the developer perspective and also more of the managerial perspective.
I'll let Keith carry this one, because he's been through this.
Oh man, so Kodi has no username password ability. We have no idea who uses any Kodi product. Like, of course, if you install from Google Play, we have an install number, right?
Right.
Other than that, everything else is guesses. We allow you to download it off the app, off our website. You can download the APK and install it that way. Tons of people do. In general, we've never, so if you ship an add-on with Google Analytics, we'll deny it for our own repo. We don't believe in any sort of analytics like that, any sort of like looking at what people install, so we do have a couple rough guesses, right? We can look at, okay, we can see add-on downloads,
right,
and we can make some rough guesstimates based on, there's a language add-on download that you need to download after the fact, or we update it, or a new skin or something of that nature, right? A new scraper. So that's the only way that we have any basis of even understanding what our user base is, right? We'll never talk about users. We always talk about installs because that's the best guess that we can go after. This was always interesting when I'm sitting in a conversation with a content provider and they're like, hey, so how can I, understand your numbers? And I was like, well, we don't really believe in that because we're very strongly against even, opt-in. It's better not to even have that system because it's so easy to get abused. On top of that, anonymized data in general is hard to do correctly. And as we've seen time and time again, it's better just to not collect it unless you actually have a use of it, right? With that said, we've definitely seen, I've talked to providers and they're like, hey, like I have to put user tracking on the client in order to basically see what people are doing. And I was like, why? Like every single time I hit a piece of media, your servers have all that data. So I don't understand why tracking needs to exist on the client side as well. And I think that, honestly, like a lot of developers out there, not to go on a tangent, but have just gotten lazy and like they've put so much stuff in clients that really don't need to be there when, anybody knows that you can just track all that stuff and monitor that stuff from the back end if you truly want to. And then it's a lot less, in my opinion, privacy exploiting, because then it's like what I hit is what which is a reasonable thing. If I know that I'm clicking on this thing, that's fine.
Right.
If I don't know that those things are happening, it's a completely different experience. So you actually mentioning that, though, that is another reason why a ton of people use our open source add-ons when they use streaming services, is because if you've ever looked at Pi-hole or anything like that when you're connecting like Netflix, oh man, the amount of like servers and data is linked to those things, and maybe it's all legitimate. Who knows? There's no way for us to tell because it's SSL. At least in Kodi land, you can actually trace back not only why that user connection happened and what exactly data is being sent, because of course you could just look at the code. So there's definitely, we've been accused of, somehow like storing data, and it's like there's no closed source component at all in anything we do, right? So if you don't install Widevine, or a binary add-on that you install externally yourself, everything that you're going to be able to see, you can audit yourself. And so we will personally, as a team, we're definitely against that. We have not found a legitimate excuse / reasons. Me personally, as somebody who's represented for business development and tried to get more quote unquote corporate adoption, I've tried to push it. I will admit, I will never do that again. I was a much younger, more naive person back then. And based on how data is being used today, I'm thankful that in those discussions, they went the way that they did, right? The one thing that is slightly annoying is we don't even have bug reporting, because the problem with that bug reporting stuff is the same problem, right? And so like all of the, like how you report a bug in Kodi land is you download, you basically submit your own debug log to us. Right. You can go download a log sender and you can send it to our paste bin, right? But there's not an easy way. And like, so we have to ask the user a ton of questions on how stuff is, or we have to make sure our logs aren't spewing too much stuff, so we get the snippet that matters, right? And so it's definitely everything's a balance, but I'm glad and I'm proud of the stance that we've took on that, and I don't ever see that changing, at least in core code, right?
Well, yeah, if we're talking like plugins, especially third-party plugins, there's not really anything you do about those ones. Like if some third-party plugin comes along and they're like, we want to put everything in there, there's going to be a keylogger. Like, you can't stop that. It's third party.
Unfortunately, it's happened.
I'm not surprised. I'm really
Yeah,
not
the
surprised.
crypto miners were pretty funny because you're and especially because they were on like Raspberry Pis and things like that people were selling, and or like Fire Sticks, and they were selling crypto miners on, or they were selling those with
Right.
preloaded add-ons, and some of them had crypto miners in them, and it's like, are you? And I mean, maybe, I guess if you have enough, like, who knows what happened there, but in general, yeah, we try really hard to be diligent. We've had a few cases where somebody has updated an add-on in our repo, and we noticed that they were downloading an obfuscated zip file from a server.
Yep.
That wasn't initially there, 6 months ago when they updated last. And we've definitely, had to talk to them. And even though we've downloaded those zip files and we've looked at them and there was nothing quote unquote malicious in them, the practice itself that they were doing is concerning enough to basically not allow it. And in one extreme case, the developer, who was a fantastic Kodi developer, had contributed tons and tons of stuff, unfortunately, like, got really upset that we were trying to remove him and, put his tail between his legs and left. And ultimately, it's unfortunate that that's how it turned out, but I think for the good of the community, like, things like that have to happen, right? Like, we have to be able to trust each other, and there has to be a level of trust. And we try really hard with our platform and with our community to only release stuff that people can trust, and to we can't, stuff slip through, unfortunately, in our repo, and stuff has happened, but by and large, we make as best effort as possible to make sure that our stuff is as safe without you having to go and audit source code.
Right. Well, Brent, from the developer perspective, obviously ignoring the the keylogger stuff, the crypto miner, like, let's just say legitimate anonymized data, ignoring the fact that maybe anonymized data might be difficult to do, would you, as a developer, find that sort of data useful to what you're doing, or is it not really something that has any value to you in the first place?
Honestly, I from my viewpoint, and this is just sort of me, I have asked the question about it before, because I think it adds value. But as Keith said, it's very hard to do right. And I think realistically for our stuff and our users, I think our stance of just not doing it is just better for everyone. It does make, from a developer side of things, make some things harder. Requires a bit more engagement from users that are having issues. But that's it. This day and age, giving up your data, it's a hard sell, because security issues everywhere, and then what is done with that data, and when it is on-sold to someone else, it's very hard to keep track of that sort of stuff. So it would be nice, but I definitely understand where the team and the project is coming from, and I fully support and will back that. There's nothing that we can't, that makes it impossible to do, that would be different if we had that data. It would make something slightly easier, but again, most everything we can find a way around it, and we just improve our logging to highlight things as best we can, and what's crucial. So yeah.
When you mentioned that there isn't a bug reporting system in Kodi, that reminded me of a similar story with Valve. So a lot of game developers find that the vast majority of their bug reports come from a specific group of people, those people being the Linux users, because they are more likely to be involved in reporting bugs. I was curious if there was any sort of very obvious skew in the data of where things are getting reported from.
Funnily enough, no. I would say no. Reason being is we have again, so on our forums, where our sort of first line of support is always done. We have very active communities of users across Windows, Android, and even sort of the Linux sort of space. So from everything that I sort of follow and see on there, I don't think one platform vastly outweighs another platform for bug reports and issues. And I think it just goes to, I guess, goes to show how much we're used across each of the major sort of platforms. And we have users, and because of the customizability, maybe that's because of the customizability that a lot of the users are those people that are more engaged in customizing, creating, sort of extending their usage in Kodi, and therefore they are probably just that user that likes or will contribute back those sort of bug reports, that sort of stuff. So yeah, we from a platform perspective, I don't think we have a real big uptick on any particular one. You could probably argue just by sheer weight of numbers that the Android stuff has a lot of sort of stuff, but that's just because Android.
Well, yeah, you'd expect the platform with the most users to have the most reporting. What was weird with the Valve situation was the number of people that play games on Linux is vastly smaller than the number of people that play games on Windows. So the fact that it outweighed it was like a really weird data point.
Yep.
So I have a theory. Gamers on Windows are used to games crashing and stuff and not being powerless to do anything about it, right? Linux users get annoyed with that stuff because they are used to being able to try to fix things themselves. Our Linux users are fairly enterprising, and these are people who figure out workarounds fairly well, right? Whether it's our own team members or whether it's community or users at large. Our Windows and our Android users, I feel like, aren't as much because they're not as well versed, which is kind of, which kind of makes sense from a tech point of view, right? They're used to, with Google Play, we're one click to install, right? You click on it in Google Play and we're there. With Windows, at least you have to go through an installer. With Linux, we don't even ship any compiled version ourselves.
Oh, right? So you just leave that up to the distros to do then.
Exactly. And so, there's a different level there. But I think to Brent's point, we have such a robust and strong user community that we don't really notice. I don't know if we notice, right? Maybe if we had one of our moderators on this call, they might feel differently. But I'm always amazed how much you post on the forums, Brent.
Well, I just said I try not to post as much as it. I've actually taken a bit of a step back lately, but it's some of our moderators. So Kodi team is made up of all sorts of people doing all sorts of roles. So it's not just developers. You've got sort of people like Keith doing the admin side of things. We've got sort of team members that moderate forums, and that's predominantly what they do in providing support for that. We've got team members that just do Python add-ons. We've got team members that do core. We've got team members that do the fantastic art that we've got on all our sort of shirts and all the sort of stuff that we do for every release. So having the teams that are such a sort of large, I guess, encompassing group of, I guess, the way what they sort of do and manage around the stuff, I think makes that sort of support stuff a little bit easier. So just like in companies, when you've got that sort of tier one support to go through, some of our mods can really sort of pick something and users will say, oh, this is a bug, this is an issue. Some of our mods will look at these logs and instantly say, nah, you've done this wrong in some file, and then it's one less thing that needs to go on to developers to then find out that, well, it was actually sort of just a user support side of things. So our forums are massive in that regard, the user support. And it's not just team members providing that support. As Keith said, it's such the community on the Kodi forums is very fantastic. We've got sort of people that just spend their own time to provide support to other sort of users that have no sort of, I guess, link to Team Kodi, but they're willing to provide their time and their effort to support sort of people with it. So the community is very vibrant in that regard. So,
so if someone was to, sorry, go on.
Oh, I just wanted to say, and we really try to uplift those people that we see. When someone notices them, any team member can invite and recommend somebody else to join the team as well, right? And so we really try to bring in people as well from the community as much as possible and make them team members and hope that they will continue to contribute like they have been. And in a few cases, we have people who maybe started out as a Python developer and this was a hobby of theirs. They learned Python strictly because of XBMC or Kodi. And now they're actually like full senior software developers and they work in companies and they have no formal training. They just really learned. It's one of these things where there's so much that you can do and there's so much you can learn from. And if you are persistent and you try and you're used to reading and trial and error and understanding, it's such a fantastic environment to kind of cultivate that. And we've had a ton of people that we've brought through Google Summer of Code, which is GSOC, right, that have also became one of our board members, Philip, originally started as a Google Summer of Code. Monalise was actually his mentor, if I recall. And and he's now an active core team member. And we've just been really lucky in that regard to be able to cultivate a community like that. And hopefully we'll continue to do that for many years to come.
Okay. So if someone, say, they're a Kodi user, they like what Kodi's doing, but they feel like there's something that maybe they want to go and improve. Like if someone wanted to get involved with the project, what would be the general path that someone would take with this?
Yeah, okay, I'll take this one.
It's probably a very wide question, but
it is. Generally, so all of our development is done on GitHub. So the best thing you can do is go there. We've got documentation that sort of I'll say walk you through how to build for all of our platforms. So be it Linux, Windows, Android. I've spent a lot of time, particularly around the Android and the Apple side of things, getting that documentation to try to be as simple and I'll say foolproof as possible for someone to be able to just go in, clone it, and build. And you've then got your own sort of built version of the software sort of in an hour or whatever. So that's the best place to start, is just clone the repo and jump into the code. Our forum there's developer sections on our forum. If you ever have questions, even just sort of Python, there's again huge community of Python developers, but even our core developers, a lot of us I guess frequent the forums quite regularly. So if you ever have questions, that's the best place to put those questions up on the forum. The reason why I sort of say that's the best place, because when I see it as an open place. So when someone has that question, the chances are someone else will have that same question at another point in time, or may have already had that same question. So the more that we can make all that stuff readily available on the forums and searchable, it's just gives us that information hub that people can go through and have a look through and pose those sort of questions. Again, there are people that aren't team members that frequent the forums quite regularly that are just very knowledgeable in Kodi just because they've spent sort of time in around it, or their day jobs are being software engineers and all that sort of stuff. So they will, if something just as a build failure or anything like that, there's a lot of people that can and do provide sort of information. So yeah, the best thing is clone the repo, jump into it, get it building, and then any questions, go through the forums, and someone will generally, again, it's best effort, but generally someone will be able to support and provide guidance to get them sort of going through that bit further. So Kodi as an organisation, as Keith said, we've participated in GSOC for a long time now. So there are parts around that sort of things for those going into doing university and other sort of things. So there are avenues that people can use programs like GSOC to really try to get their feet wet and jump in and be mentored by. We've had some fantastic mentors in sort of Team Kodi, getting sort of projects sort of through and across things. So I think just being that sort of gives you a step into talking to some people that are really into as software engineers by trade. You can pick their brains and really give them a chance to see how to become a professional at. So yeah.
But if you're not a developer, the forums are a great place to start answering questions. We always need wiki help, unsurprisingly. We always need help with documentation. We always need help with that. As Brent said, we have so many pieces. It takes a village, and Kodi's a perfect example of that. So graphics designers, skinners, if you have something that you're interested in contributing as a hobby, we probably need people like you in our project. And GitHub's one of the best places. Our forum is as well. We have a ton of Matrix channels as well. Our Matrix channels are bridged to IRC and our own Slack.
I'm sure that's a nightmare to manage.
It's actually not these days. It's pretty easy. It's just like one basically relay bot that goes and does both of them.
No, I've got a bridge as well. The problem is when you have someone that comes through who's, a less than friendly person, and you got to deal with them across these platforms. It can certainly be messy.
Yeah, you're right. It's true. Yeah. We haven't delved in the whole Discord world at all, but we try to be as accessible as possible. And a ton of our core developers do respond both on the forum and also in real-time chat. So, hit us up, open a pull request. Like if you see a place where you think that you can contribute, definitely please do. Feel free to talk to us and reach out. There's a lot going on with the project, and we could always use more eyeballs and more help, even if you're just somebody who answers someone's questions.
Well, on the topic of helping people out and documentation and things like that, one of the things I've noticed a lot of open source projects tend to suffer with is translation. A lot of projects are very English centric, which makes sense. It's one of the biggest languages in the world, but there are a lot of people out there who maybe have English as a second language who aren't really as comfortable with this, or maybe people who are, really comfortable in both languages who do have that ability to do that translation work. What sort of place does translation and work like that have in Kodi?
I have to shout out Gade, man. So we got an amazing guy who basically, so we're using Weblet now.
Okay.
And Weblate, I think that's how you pronounce it, right, Brent?
Yep.
And one team member named Gabe got so fed up with how bad our old translation systems was. And shout out to the guy who was maintaining that as well, Alan WWW1. Like, this guy did so much stuff single-handedly, but now Gade is doing the same thing of setting up all the infrastructure and allowing it. He's gone through and found all of the people. So we've moved over to a new platform entirely. Okay. Where they're sponsors of us. Luckily, they cut us a great deal, and they're such a fan. They're an open source project as well, but we're hosted on their platform, so we don't have to maintain stuff. And he has gone through and found all of the really high output contributors and invited them into a Slack channel. And so now we have them all on our Slack. Like, he's done so much stuff. We're really, really, really thankful to have all the work that he's done in order to try to get translations to a state that it's functional. And we have so many contributors on the translation side.
Yeah, I would say, Keith, you might be able to sort of say whether this or not, but because I'm not in the industry side of things, but the translation side of Kodi, I think, is absolutely amazing. We are translated into so many different languages and dialects. You name it, there's probably a translation that's in place that is, I would say, high quality. Again, community maintained, so you've got everyone that contributes to that. They are contributing to the betterment of the project. So yeah, that's, as I said, there are so many aspects to Kodi that a user can contribute to without being a developer. You don't need to be a developer to help improve the project. So the translation side of things is a very good example of that. The more that we can get Kodi translated into every language out there, the better we are, and the better experience is for all the users. So,
and one of the best parts about the new translation system is it supports add-ons as well. So you can submit, if you're an add-on developer, you can actually submit your add-on for translations for us, and you can go through and basically get that supported and get that translated by our translators as well. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible to allow hopefully every language out there. And we have a lot of esoteric languages that we support, and it's awesome to see that.
Can you give me just a moment? My OBS just froze your cameras. I need to fix that.
Let's go.
Okay, so we're back. Yeah, what a mess. I really like the desktop I'm using, but it does cause a couple of issues here and there. This is the worst I've ever seen it be. I've never had this many issues with my video capture, so that's fun. Okay, so we finished talking about translation. What I also want to talk about is, during the pre-recording, one of the things you mentioned is Kodi basically rides on the backs of giants, like projects like FFmpeg, that without things like this, Kodi just would not be able to exist. What other projects out there? Obviously, FFmpeg is a big one if you want to talk about that one as well, but what other projects out there does Kodi rely on and just would not be able to function without it?
FFmpeg is definitely the largest there, right? Python
Sure,
definitely
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
What are other big ones, Brent?
Well, gosh, again, in the open source world, everything sort of depends on your major ones. Your OpenSSL. So again, we use that for a huge chunk. So we use curl. So everything around libcurl for I guess most of our sort of network traffic is run through curl wrappers. So you sort of you pick a large open source project, and chances are we're probably using it. And it's always the ones like that. As I said, so like curl with is just sort of the back end to so much sort of stuff. You've obviously got OpenSSL, which is the back end of all SSL stuff that's covers the world essentially. FFmpeg is our video sort of library that sort of covers most of our sort of video side of things. We use Python in a, I don't want to say a unique way, but it's in a way that until reasonably recently hasn't really been well supported or well, I guess, controlled from Python themselves, using sort of sub-interpreter usage. So we tend to push things a little bit further than what some of these projects sort of do in the past, because you're sort of combining it into, I don't want to say a niche, but when you're sort of putting it into a media center that's run across so many devices, so many platforms, we do find that we tend to test some of the boundaries and limitations here and there. So yeah, there's, as I said, there are a huge number of dependencies that we use. I think there's close to 50 odd different projects that are used to build the building blocks of Kodi to get you go into what you see when you open the app. So yeah, we really do rely on those projects upstream, and we do try to, so we try to support back and I guess provide sort of bug issues, and even provide fixes and code to many of these as and where we can, because obviously some of this stuff is outside of our league when it comes to what our knowledge base is. So we, as I said, we do sort of rely on that side of things. Obviously, FFmpeg, as discussed, is a huge vital piece to the video decoding pipeline that we use. So we're very, very much reliant on that, and we are affected by their changes for the good and the bad. But again, it's something that's really good for the ecosystem, I think, being able to use that. Other programs or other projects that are looking to potentially utilize some of those projects as a base can always look at our code to see how we may do it and how they could always improve on how we do it, if they want to sort of see some of the, as I said, some of the extensive use of it. So yeah.
Awesome. And I guess the last thing I want to mention is a lot of people are unaware about a lot of the IPTV stuff that exists that is supported on Kodi as well. Like, this is something that I'm like briefly aware of. I know there's a couple of applications that are supported on Linux as well, but this is something that, you know, you can get access to this content. It's just freely out there. It's just usually not that well, I guess. It's not that well explained. It's not that well like documented. It's not that well marketed is what term I was looking for. But a lot of the content that like you might think is only going to be available from your TV, you can get at through other means. If there was anything, I don't know if there was, yeah, I don't know if I was where I was going with that. I just wanted to bring it up because it was something you brought up in the pre-show as well. That I felt like was just worth mentioning. Is there anything on here that I haven't really touched on yet? I think we've touched on pretty much. Actually, one thing before we do our proper sign-offs is, I know we've briefly mentioned a couple of names throughout the show so far, but you guys aren't the only people involved in the project. There's a lot of people involved in Kodi. And
So many.
Yeah. And I know if you try to do everything, you're going to be here all day, but are there any specific faces you want to, appreciate the work, give some sort of appreciation to the work they do or anything like that? Any word you want to say on them? I know this could go way too long, but I thought I would just bring it up anyway.
I'll let Keith sort of take this for the old timers because you've got the history on this side of things. So any shout outs from any of the old timers?
And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of shout outs to the people who kind of built the building blocks that we're definitely on the backs of giants, right? And Davila's name got popped up a bunch. He did a bunch of work initially on just Apple stuff, but then worked on core stuff a ton. I have to name drop the Uni, who's now a member of the Bitcoin core team and originally started development from Kodi and XBMC back then, right? And both of them together did the original Android port, along with some help from some other people. Jay Marshall, I have to mention Jay Marshall as well, who's like kind of the godfather of XBMC. He was our leader for so many years, and he's a Kiwi actually out in your guys' neck of the woods, a professor out there. Spiff, whose name has already came up, has just done incredible stuff throughout the years, and we're really thankful that he's still around. There's hundreds and hundreds of contributors. We probably had over 100 core contributors throughout. We probably have 100 current core contributors and then another 100 historical core contributors. And so many other people on the form side, on the skinning side, on, just in all aspects of it. It's hard for me to specifically mention people because there's just so many who have contributed, right? And I'm so grateful. As you said, we're completely volunteer, not a single person, none of the board members, nobody's paid. A few people have been contracted to work on Kodi for their day job and also be able to do that, like what's common in open source land, but nobody. The foundation operates on very little donations, and really the donations are enough for us to have a DevCon every year, and that's about it. And so, if anybody wants to contribute back, please buy merch, give us money, donate us money. It's all tax deductible. If there's any decent companies out there who are interested in sponsorship, I'd be more than happy to talk to them about that as well. There's a lot of, I guess, to reiterate, it takes a village, and there's so many people who have contributed, both small and large, in so many ways. I myself personally have been a team member for over 10 years, and it's been a deep part of my life and open source and the development of my career and community. And I'm so thankful for projects like ours. And yeah. Little long-winded, but
It's fine. It's fine. Anyone you want to mention, Brent, or?
Oh, really, as sort of Keith mentioned, it's hard to sort of single out sort
Sure.
of some people. You got sort of guys like Memphis who really did a lot of the TVI stuff, which sort of was my sort of stepping point into the team. Davila as well, of course. You got people like Pete who made input stream adaptive, our sort of IPTV based sort of add-on. He single-handedly carried that for years, and that is what sort of enables things like all your DRM-based add-ons. So you got sort of have a Funky Fish at the moment who's carrying on the FFmpeg Direct stuff. You got El Rusak, who's doing some of the really crazy stuff in core at the moment, or as and when he has time. Hopefully he'll hear this and pull out that Vulcan port, but we'll see.
yeah.
So yeah, other than that, everyone who's contributed really, even just outside of the core developers, we got like Corellin, some of our mods, Darren Hill, who's board member. You got all these other guys that just all their time is valued immensely for the project. So any time and any effort anyone can put into the project, we really do appreciate it. So feel free if you're looking for something to do, come our way. We'll there's somewhere something you can contribute to, or as I said, if you want to just throw a couple of bucks the foundation's way, so we can do our developer conferences and enjoy some of that. That'd be it's all good. So
awesome. Is there anything else super critical you guys want to touch on, or anything you feel like that we kind of missed that should probably be mentioned before we kind of wrap it up?
Nothing I can think of. Keith, here, anything we need to?
We can do this for hours.
Yeah.
I spend way too much time talking during DevCon, and there's so much that I never get a chance to touch on. And this is great. It's good to. I appreciate you giving us this opportunity, Brody, to just talk to someone who's not so involved, right? Like me, like Brent and I can banter like this for literally hours, and we've done it. And so it's good to have not only a moderator, but also just, to have conversations like this and allow people to peek behind the curtain and see what we're about. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for doing this. Apologies for the technical issues we had in there, but I need to come up with a better capture solution, because for everything else, my solution works great. It's just whenever I get OBS involved, that's when things start to get a bit flaky with this desktop. Like I've got the developer on Discord, so hit him up, see what he can work on. So okay, if someone wants to get involved with Kodi, so it's the Kodi website and Kodi GitHub, yes?
Yep. That's the best place. As I said, the website is probably first port of call for everyone, because
which is Kodi.com?
Kodi.tv.
Oh, Kodi.tv.
Kodi.tv. Yep. Jump on there, go to the forums, because again, any aspect of Kodi, you can pop your question in there, be it support question, be it developer question, be it add-on question, skinning, all the sort of features. Go, Keith.
So there's a button that says contribute at the top of the page. Click on that, and every category that Brent just mentioned is listed. And
nice.
Instructions on how you can contribute is listed. From coding to building an add-on to helping users, helping with translations, all of what we've talked about. Sorry to interrupt you, Brent, but I just wanted to call it out. This is the best page to start out with.
Yep, that's all good.
Is there anywhere else you'd want to direct people towards, or is that the major things? You said there was a wiki before. Is that linked on the website as well?
Yep. Everything's linked from the website. So, but yeah, any contributors that want to improve our wiki, definitely welcome. It sometimes can languish behind a little bit. So yeah, it's I guess one of the difficulties with developing
QA and testing as well. Yeah, all of that. The the contribute page is fantastic. Definitely check out the contribute page. It kind of covers all of that. It covers good ways that people can get started, from code to add-ons to translations to all of that. And buy merch if you want. The shirt that you saw Brent wearing, I think that one is still available. Mine is not, but yeah, mine's a little old.
How long you had that one for?
Maybe 10 years.
Okay then. Yeah, maybe that one's not available.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have any personal links you want to mention, or you don't really care about that? It's just directed towards the Kodi stuff.
Yep. Check out Kodi.tv.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll give you guys the actually wait, my outro first, then we'll give you the final words. If you want to go watch my main channel stuff, that is Brody Robertson. It is do 6 videos ish a week, mainly Linuxy focused stuff. Right now, it's been a lot of the Red Hat situation happening, where Red Hat's locking source code behind things. It's a mess. It's a giant mess. Go check that out. There's a whole playlist for it. I've got a gaming channel called Brody on Games, where I think right now, I'll probably finish Black Mesa. Maybe I'm playing Portal 2. And also Final Fantasy 16. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. And if you're watching the video version, there is an RSS feed. It's on pretty much every podcast platform you can find. Google Podcasts, iTunes, all that stuff. Just search up Tech Over Tea and you will probably find it. If you don't, send me a message and I'll make sure it gets there. I'll give you guys final words. What do you want to say? Who wants to go first?
Thanks for listening. Check out Kodi.tv, and thanks for having us, Brody.
Awesome. Brent, you got anything to say yourself?
That's enough. Thanks very much for having us, Kodi. Much appreciated. For Brody.
Yes, it's fine. I'm out. They can't see you, so if you do a thing, it's fine.